Hello guys, this is Panzermeister36 and today's video is going to be the 3D printed TREX review and comparison part 2. I already did a first set where I reviewed 6 brands, and those were Heavy Hobby, E.T. Model, Tankraft, TREX Studio, RochM Model, and Quickwheels. And today I have 6 more. We have Minor Model, Chino Model, Panzerwork Design, PanzerArt, Def Model, and RyeField Model. And there's going to be a part 3 because I still have to look at Scale Colors 3D, Demon Barber Design, FC Model Trend, though their stuff is usually garbage, so I might not bother. There's Yan Model, MIG Ammo recently came up with some, it's never going to end. And as you can see, there's more than 20 brands that make these tracks, and my goal here with these videos is to let you guys know which ones are actually worthwhile, because in the grand scheme of things, they're all the same. They're all just 3D printing tracks, mainly the same types of tracks for the most popular vehicles out there. So I want to do these videos to let you guys know which ones are worthwhile. Alright, let's start with Panzerwork Design. These tracks are very good price. They're only 25 euros per set, which is about 25 US dollars. And they make a whole wide range of options. They make all the Panzer 3 and 4 series. They've got King Tiger, Tiger, Panther, and so on. Panzer 38T as well. And then they also make some allied stuff like a bunch of Sherman variants and also the Comet and so on. Inside the box we have an instruction guide here, and also 2 little boxes that each contain about half the tracks and then 1 type of pin. I'm going to do a demonstration on how to assemble these tracks, but just for this type because all the other ones are basically the same. They all use a very similar process here, where you've got the individual links which you line up, and then you push the ends together with pins. Now in real life, there's only 1 pin that goes through. Actually, it would be from this end. That's the pin head. It would go all the way through, and then you have a cotter pin that actually locks it this way. You can't do that in scale, so instead you have 2 pins that just go in on each side and simulate the entire thing. The pins lock in place with little ridges. You can see there that line up with indentations on the inside of the track link, so that they actually pop into place and you shouldn't require any glue. So the way I put these tracks together is I basically will do only 1 type of the pin at a time, because if you have both types of pin out, it gets confusing and you're going to start to put the wrong one on the wrong side. So for example, I'm starting now with, I guess, the cotter pin, and I've got a whole length of track here that I'm assembling, and I simply line it up in my hands like this, and I grab the pins and just pop them into place. So you can see the pins click into place like that. I find that I can push the first click in with my hand, but these actually have a double click. So what I do is after a while I can just go in with my tweezers here and just make sure that they're in all the way. And after I have maybe 20 or 30 track links, they start to get a little bit ungainly because they're only pinned at the top, the bottom is loose. So then I'll flip them over, I'll grab the other type of pin, and I'll start to work on the other side. Alright, so I put together at least 30 of these track links, and these are absolutely fantastic. These are up there with Tankraft and TREX. They are perfectly printed, there's no print lines on them at all, there's no defects, there's no supports left over on any of mine so far. All of the holes have been cleanly molded, and the pins fit in perfectly. They're nicely tapered, so they slide in and they lock, and I didn't break a single pin, and I didn't break a single track link. The pins lock in. The double click really helps because it goes click click, and then they're in there for sure. So there's no glue required. These are absolutely fantastic, and we're off on a good start with this video. Now I also have a set of their Panzer 38T track links, and these work a little differently. As you can see, they're a bit of like a rocket lock, like an AK magazine. So there's only 1 pin per, and you kind of hook this around and then twist it up and put the pin in. I've put together a few of them here, and they are a little bit more fiddly. I'd say it's going to be easier to break pins because the pin is so much longer, because it's the full width of the track link. But I was a little careful. I haven't broken a pin so far. You can see that it works perfectly fine. So I imagine that maybe some of the other tracks, like their Sherman tracks, might work a little differently. I know Bruce the Model Noob is going to be doing a video on some of these brand Sherman TREX soon, so you can look forward to that. But so far these have my seal of approval. They are absolutely excellent. Next up, we're going to look at PanzerArt. These tracks retail for a little bit more. They're 30 to 34 euros depending on the specific variant, and they make Tiger, Panther, Ferdinand, Panzer III, Panzer IV style, Winterketten, etc. I think they also make some Allied stuff now, but this video might already be out of date by the time you guys see it. Inside the box, we have a bag of track links and a bag of track pins. Now these are a little different in that there's no two types of pin, there's just one, so you technically have like the same pin on either side, like a pin head on either side, but I don't think that's going to be really noticeable in the scale because these things are quite small anyways. So I'm running into a little bit of a problem with these tracks. It seems like the pins are either too big or the tolerance of the track link around the hole is too small. And so when I put the pins into place, it is blowing out the side of the track. So I'll see if I can get that on footage for you here. So it slides in perfectly, but then when I get to the point where it should click into place, there you go. You can see that it just blows out the corner of the track, and now the pin actually is completely exposed there. So I put together about 10 links here, and at least half of them have exploded in this way. You can see this guy's blown out, that guy's blown out, that guy's blown out, this guy's cracked, that guy's blown out. I didn't bother with those guys. On the other side here, I had a few that blew out and cracked. You can see some, like this guy here, for example. Hopefully you can see that, but it's not blown out, but there's obviously a crack there, a stress mark. And this guy here, actually, the pin head flew off instead of it cracking the link. So I believe that what this is an issue with the track is simply too thin around the edge of the hole there, so that when it clicks into place, it just simply breaks from the stress. So I don't know if any of the larger track links that PanzerArt makes, like let's say a Tiger link, if they're going to be thicker and those are going to be okay, but these tracks are not working well. As you can see that they're basically all breaking on me, which is very unfortunate. Makes them unusable. Next up, we're going to look at RyeField Model. These tracks are more expensive. They're around $40 to $60 per set, which is again roughly the same in euros. And they only make a few different options, mainly as upgrade sets for their specific kits. And they also make some that are plastic, which look very similar, but make sure that if you're getting one of these, you're getting the 3D printed one if you want the 3D printed one. But they also make plastic sets, which look very similar. I specifically got this set because it has some interesting ice cleat options. You can get the Mittelstahl in here before in other kits as well as in plastic. But these guys here, the Hammerstollen, which are very rare, I've never seen them actually modeled before. Alright, in the box I've got two sets of tracks. Now these are actually going to be handed because these are Winterketten, and since they have that extended blade, they will actually matter which side they go on. I've got some build plates here, so the pins aren't separately removed as they were with the previous brands, which is very convenient. Instead, you're going to have to yank them all off individually. I've got one of cotter pins, one of pin heads, and then I've got two other build plates in here that have the ice cleats on them as well. And we also have a jig. This is a standard RyeField Model plastic jig part, which is the same as in their kits when you have workable tracks included. Alrighty, so the RyeField Model tracks are pretty good. A few things to note, they're very tight, so actually putting the links together without even touching the pins, they feel like they're gonna snap, but it seems to work okay. The pins themselves, they don't have the locking ridge system. They're simply a wedge shape interference fit, so they're tapered until they just kind of wedge themselves in place, and that can lead you to breaking the pins if they're a little too big for the hole, or they can also slide out if they're a little too small for the hole. So these are okay. They're also printed a little bit more thick than the other ones, I would say. They're a little bit chunkier, and you can see that some of the Winterketten extensions are slightly warped, though I don't know if that's going to be much of an issue because these things in real life did kind of get pretty nasty looking, like they're all bent and stuff. So they're okay, but they're definitely more expensive than the other ones we've looked at, and they're not as crisply molded or printed. Now the ice cleats, I haven't even bothered with them. You can see that they're well printed. You're just going to cut them off the build plate, and then super glue them on the track at whatever interval you need. They actually give you instructions. I forgot to mention this, but there are instructions which show you putting them on, and you can do different intervals, and of course you don't need to put on all the ice cleats. Usually you have just like, you know, maybe the middle Stollen, and then maybe some vehicles will have only the hammer Stollen, which are those spiky guys on the end. There's a lot of different variations you can have with these ice cleats on these German vehicles. Now, they're actually not quite right. The middle Stollen, the big guys in the middle, are fine, but in real life the hammer Stollen, the little blade guys on the side, they actually stick completely through these slots. If you've ever noticed these slots on most German links, they slide in from this end and they actually protrude out here, and then a cotter pin locks them in place. These just kind of sit on this end. They don't actually stick through, so that, you know, in real life you would be able to see them sticking through somewhat, and I mean, it would be really hard to model that as a separate piece. You'd really have to print the whole thing with the ice cleat sticking through to make it look, you know, maybe appropriate in scale, especially if you're gonna have a cotter pin on there. So having these separate isn't really a great option. I'll post a picture here of Tank Brusher. He's got some 3D printed models you can buy and print yourself, and he's got the correct setup for the hammer Stollen ice cleats there. And while we were talking about the ice cleats, one of the pins did indeed fall out because there's no locking ridges. So yeah, the interference fit isn't quite right. These links are not as good as the other ones. Lightning round. These are minor model, 3D printed, fully workable tracks, and they're actually fully pre-assembled. These tracks are quite cheap, depending on the set you get, but they only make certain types of tracks, and I think that has to do with the fact that they're printed pre-assembled. They basically make German lubricated style tracks, so those are the ones where you have like the links that kind of go together, and there's a rubber pad between them, so think of things like a half track as we have here, and similar vehicles like the Kettenkrad and the Borgward. But they also do make, I think, an RSO, which is more of a standard type of track link. So this is what we have in the box, and this is it, because they are printed as a workable, fully assembled piece. Now these look very impressive. I don't quite understand how this is done, but clearly it can be done. 3D printing, in terms of how it's actually executed, is not my expertise, but these are very impressive. They're quite strong. They're I'd say like 80% crisp. Like they're a little bit not as fine as some of the other ones we've looked at so far, but given that they're already together like this, that's very impressive, and I think that's acceptable. You can see we have 2 lengths of track, and then we also have 2 individual rubber pads at the end, and that's going to be what locks them together. When you put them together on your vehicle, you'll glue that in place, and that'll lock it. So yep, minor model. That was pretty quick. These are very good looking, and I can't wait to use them on my upcoming half-track build. And they're also really, really cheap, which is impressive. Next up, we're going to look at Def Model. Def Model is quite a well-known resin company. They mainly make things like exhausts for jet aircraft, ejection seats, and also wheels to replace the rubber wheels in large wheeled vehicles, for example. These tracks are quite expensive. They're 44 euros, but they're supposed to go together quite easily because there's actually no separate pins. They make this Panzer III set as well as 2 sets for 251 half tracks, like an early and a late style. So in the box here, there's obviously going to be a little bit more work involved with these because the tracks are still on the build plate. So the way these work is you simply pop the track links off the build plate, which you can do with your hand because the supports are very narrow and they come off without any real excess on the back of the track link there. And now we simply pop the track links together. You can see that we have little nubbins there on the end of the track that simply pop into the holes on the inside of the back of the track link. Now you should be very careful here because sometimes with similar types of tracks, like there's an infamous set of MiniArt T34 tracks that work the same way. They're made of plastic, not 3D printed resin. But essentially every single time you put those T34 tracks together, when you try to pop them together, the pin just explodes and then the tracks don't work. But these are actually quite good. In the last video I did on the first batch of 3D printed tracks, the Quickwheels tracks worked the same way, but they were very fragile because the resin was brittle. And so I had a few examples where they broke. But so far I have not had any issues because the pins here seem to be stronger and the resin is more flexible, so they actually just bend and pop into place instead of shattering. So these def model tracks, they go together very well. They're nice and quick, and I did not have a single one break so far, which is a good sign. I'm going to use these on an upcoming build, so if I do have any breakage, I'll let you know in that project. But I am impressed with these. Now they're printed very well. There is some slight print layer lines visible on the on the edges of the guide horns in some locations, but that's not too bad. And I'm also slightly concerned because since those pins are not super big, the little bumps that they lock together with, there isn't nearly as much interfacing surface as there is if you have the whole pins going through. So these could come apart if you're a little rough with them, maybe like during painting or weathering. That's a possibility, but be a little gentle and they should be good to you. They're also very flexible, which is conducive to looking good on the model because they'll sag naturally on their own, like a metal track would, for example. So apart from these slight layer lines and the possible fragility, they're also, as I said before, quite expensive. They're 44 euros, which is almost double some of the other brands, but they do go together a little bit easier and quicker because there's no separate pins. So you can pay a little bit more and have a little bit easier time with assembly, but these do have my sealed approval. They are quite nice. Alrighty now, Chino Model. These ones come from Japan, and ordering them is an absolute pain in the ass because you order them on a special website, you pay for shipping, and then it looks like it's going to ship it to your house, but actually it ships to a third-party warehouse, and they hold on to it, and then they ask you to pay for shipping again to come from that warehouse to you. So the shipping price was about twice what it should have been, and also the tracks are about $30 to $50 per set. The cheaper one, 30 bucks, is the put them together yourself, and the 50 bucks is the pre-assembled. They make essentially every conceivable type of track link, everything from a Panzer 1 up to a mouse. If it exists, I'm sure these guys have it available. I've got two sets. I've got a Type 7 for a Panzer 3-4. These are the pre-assembled. And then I've got a workable one, which means you have to put these together on your own. This was very graciously sent to me by David Knights from the Plastic Model Mojo Podcast because he clearly wants me to suffer. So inside the box of the Put Them Together Yourself set, we have a very handy Japanese instruction set, which I guess I don't need because I can't read Japanese. And we have a build plate with the world's smallest track links on them. Here's an X-Acto blade. Look at how small these things are. How am I going to get these off? Then how am I going to put them together? This is like the tracks are smaller than the support structure. This is ridiculous. Additionally, I have to get my own wire, which was not supplied, to put them together. And then super glue it in place without gluing the tracks together. I don't know how this is possible. I'm not even going to bother. But if you're feeling brave, you can spend 30 bucks on these and another 30 bucks shipping them twice and try it yourself. Okay, this is more like it. This is the pre-assembled set, which costs a little bit more money and looks actually feasible. So you have to cut off all the support structure, which is quite extensive, but then presumably these track links will be workable. So the Chino Model tracks are indeed fully workable once you remove them from the excessive support structure. Now I just got sick and tired and I broke it off about halfway along because I'm never going to use these, so it's okay, but in reality the full length, as you can see, is much longer. So there is at least 5 different layers of support structure. You carve one away and then you carve off the next. It just never ends, and it's honestly excessive. I don't think you need this much. Maybe it has to do with the fact that they're printed workably. There's all this extra supporting required, but at that point it's taking me significantly longer to carve away the support structure than it does to put together the individual links with separate pins. This is just taking way too long. And there's a lot of cleanup to do because you have to carve away all the support structure. Like it's insane. And then the track is horribly disfigured on this side. I haven't finished, like you can see there's still some little bits on the bottom here to remove. And I could spend a little bit more time on this, but if you're doing this yourself, you can do that, but I don't really see the point in that now, considering I'm not going to really use these. Now, the way that these tracks are printed, you have a whole set for the vehicle that's printed this way, with the supports coming off one side, and you have the mirror image. So the way this is set up is you're supposed to put on the vehicle so this side, the clean side, faces outwards, and the side that's all pimply because of the support structure will face inward toward the hull side, so it won't be as visible. Now there's a little bit more work involved because, as you can see, each length is only about 1/3 of the entire vehicle, so you actually have individual lengths here to make up the difference, because you still have to connect some of these lengths together to make the full run. So then you've got separate tiny pin heads to glue on. You can see them discussing that in the instructions here. This is just a whole kit on its own, and it's a lot of work, and it's more work than it would be to simply, as I said before, go with one of the other options where you just put the pins in. Now maybe if you are more comfortable simply removing material than putting the pins in yourself, these do work, and after a while of removing the support structure, you will end up with a nicely workable set of tracks. These are actually pretty good, and they're printed okay. There's a little bit of layer lines visible on the guide horns. Maybe you can see that in my close-up photos, but these are pretty decent. It's just there's a lot of cleanup involved, and it's not what I want to get into. As I've said, there's some better options with separate pins that are much quicker to put together. Alright, so to conclude, the only tracks from this batch that I would spend money on again are going to be definitely the Panzerwork Design, because these ones are a great price. They're only about 25 euros, $25 per set, and they are by far the most crisply printed and easiest to assemble. The detail on the tracks themselves is very good. The measurements and everything of the tracks is also highly accurate, and the way that the pins go in is perfect. The pins are nicely tapered, and there was no interference in the holes, and the double click locked them in very well. So I'm definitely going to go with these more in the future. The Def model set, also really good. My only issue here was that they're quite expensive. They're almost double the price of these, and they're a little faster to put together because you have to simply snap them together instead of putting pins in, but you also have to pop them off the build plate to begin with, and they only make a handful of options as well. The minor model tracks are also very good. They're printed to a decent level, and they only really make these half track options, so they're quite limited in their application. But if I ever build another half track again, I'm definitely going to look at getting a set of these because they're like 15 bucks. They're super cheap, and they're already pre-assembled, so that's amazing. So I do hope that with this video today, and also with the one I did 8 months ago on the first batch, I was able to help you guys narrow down the wide range of tracks that are available on the market and figure out which ones are good quality. If you like my content, appreciate my work, you can support me on Patreon with the link on screen now. The people there who give me a little bit of money every month really help me in being able to buy all these products, especially if I'm buying dozens of sets of 3D printed tracks to review. Their support for a few bucks a month over there is greatly appreciated, and it really helps me to make these videos. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them on below. As always, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, stay safe, goodbye, and happy modeling. Take care.